What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today we are going to estimate the amount of money lost on ultra modern QBs this football season. This started with a comment that Neo Cards and Comics made a few times, talking about, I'd love to know how much money has been lost on ultra modern QBs because of how much of a bloodbath it's been, but there's no way to calculate that. There's no way to find out. And I took that idea and I ran with it. I made another video, which I will link to in the description below, which you see on the screen, that calculated the amount of money lost on Prism Base and Prism Silver PSA 10s, right? These are estimates. These aren't actually estimates, sorry. These are the actual losses in the market because we have hard data on this, right? We know the pop counts. We know the prices that they were selling at in September versus December. And what you see on the screen is the total market loss was $4 million on these ultra modern QBs for just base and silver Prism PSA 10s. And at the end of that video that I made, I flippantly threw out, oh yeah, that means the number for the entire market's got to be at like 100 million or at least 100 million or something like that. And I just threw it out there haphazardly. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, you know what? I can actually take a stab at creating an estimate for the entire market, because this is what I used to do as part of my day job in business analysis once upon a time. I put together some assumptions and we do some math, and voila, like it's a number pops up. And so that's what we're going to do today. I am going to make some conservative assumptions, because that means the number I end up with will be a conservative estimate, and we can say that the market loss will be this number or higher. And so that's what we're going to do today. But before we do that, a couple of housekeeping items. One is that if you have ideas for card analysis, like the ones I'm going to show you, or like the analysis I'm going to show you, leave a comment below, let me know, because I might take your idea. I've done that a couple times before. There's no guarantee that I will do it, but I will definitely consider it. But it will depend on how time consuming it is, whether or not I know enough about the products, I have an approach for it. But yeah, leave a comment below if you have some ideas, and I'll definitely consider it. The second thing, if you enjoyed this video, if you like the analysis, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, share it with your friends or other hobby people. Yeah, that's just a quick plug for the channel. Now let's get into it. Two assumptions we're going to make. One is that card prices will decrease at roughly the same rate that base and silver Prism PSA 10s did. Pretty obvious. Two, where possible, Patrick Mahomes will be the data point we use. And so why that is, I will show you. On this chart, you can see here, Patrick Mahomes makes up roughly 40% of the market. Here it is. So he, as of December, his Prism PSA 10 was $3 million. The entire ultra modern market is 7.5. So that's 40%. So that's a big chunk of it, right? So we're going to use Mahomes wherever possible. The other thing to note is that the change from the beginning of the season to December is 30% for his Prism PSA 10. So keep that number in mind, because we're going to double check that in a little bit. All right, let's get back to it. So now, with those two assumptions in mind, we know the size of the Prism and Silver base and Silver Prism PSA 10 markets. So the first thing we need to do is now consider all the other grades that exist, right? So what I have on the screen here on the left is the PSA 10s. On the right is the PSA 9s. You can see that the market cap is nearly 3 million here. It's roughly 2 million on the right, because the pop count is much higher, even though the value is much lower. Now, I realize that this is possibly due to some people subbing over and over again, and so some of these are probably duplicates or cracked slabs. There's nothing we can do about that. But looking at the numbers, this is just the PSA 9. I'm not including BGS 9.5s, even any BGS 10s or black labels that exist, SGC 10s, SGC 9.5s, and then there's also 8s, 8.5, 7s, all the way down, right? So based off of the fact that this number for just PSA 9s is roughly 2/3 the size of PSA 10s, that gives me a directional number that I can work with, right? And so that's what I'm showing on the screen here. It's roughly 2/3. And so that's why my assumption will be that it's all the other grades combined. So that's, PSA 9s, 8s, 7s, 6, all that stuff, BGSs and SGCs. There's going to be roughly 3/4 of the value of the entire PSA 10 market. The second thing is I included the prices below from September. You could see that in September, the PSA 9 sold for roughly $900 to $1,000, whereas now it's $700. So that is also roughly a 25% decrease, which is in line with that 30% decrease of PSA 10s I discussed earlier. So this is like a double check to make sure that it's not just PSA 10s that are down 30%. The PSA 9s are roughly in line with that. So that gives me some confidence and comfort that these numbers, or that trend is accurate, right? That we can extrapolate it to other cards. So the main thing though is that we're gonna say other grades besides PSA 10s across all the other companies will be roughly 75% of the PSA 10 market, okay? All right, so that's the first thing we've done. So you can see here, we know the number was 4 million for the base and silver prism PSA 10 market. We said it's going to be roughly 75% for all the other grades that are not PSA 10s. And then that leaves raw, right? Because we need to consider raw to close the loop on the base and silver prism market, right? And we're going to go with 1/4 of the base and silver prism PSA 10 market. So 1 million. Why is that? It's because there are many more raw cards available from 2020 onwards because they haven't been graded. And why is that? The first thing is after the PSA shutdown in 2021, that gave the market time to shift away from base, right? People aren't sending as many base cards in for grading because they don't have the same value and cachet as they did before the PSA shutdown, right? So there's a lot more base out there. Panini has printed a ton of these things, right? So that's why we're able to say that there's probably a lot of raw stuff out there from 2020 onwards. And two, a lot of the QBs that only recently became hobby relevant, so I'm talking about Desmond Ridder, Jordan Loud, Jones, Purdy, Howell, Pickett, they only recently became hobby relevant, so their cards weren't worth sending in until recently. And so that means that there's probably more stuff in the raw category because they just haven't been sent in until because nobody ever thought to do it until recently, right? So I think assuming that raw cards are roughly worth 1/4 of the PSA 10 market, I think that's a pretty safe, it's a pretty decent assumption based off of those two things. Okay, so that's what we're at. We're now at $8 million in total losses just from base and silver prisms, right? But what about all the other parallels? So what I have on the screen here is all the parallels, and this is from GemRate. Shout out to GemRate and Ryan. His data has been immensely helpful for this analysis. Well, the top line is the prism for that year, so that's the one we're looking at. But there are roughly 1,500 total gems in his database, right? And the base prism or the prism is roughly 60%, 937 compared to 1,552. So that's roughly, 60% of all the gems that are out there. Let's take a look to see what the other cards are selling at though. So again, this is the prism, the base, whatever you want to call it. It's $3,100. Next on the list is red, white, and blue. It's at 121 total gems. So that's selling for less, actually. It's selling for $2,200. Okay, we're gonna go to green prism next, which only has 76 gems. That's selling for $2,800. So roughly in line with the base prism, right? And then we get to orange and all these ones with much lower pops on the list. The orange is selling, because it's a number card, it's out of $275. The orange is selling for $6,100. So well above the $3,000 mark, right? It's double. And so basically from the orange on downwards, all of these cards are going to sell for way more than the silver prism price here. So that means that we should account for that. Even though there's less of these cards, Once you add these all up, there's roughly, I think, like 400 or so of these cards. They should offset the lack of quantity with a higher price, right? So, and then when you look at the other years, right? So there's only 18 total parallels in 2018 there's 21, 2019 there's 24, yet et cetera, et cetera. We all know Panini printed parallels to the moon in the last couple of years. And so how do we compare the size of base and prism versus the other 16 or 17 that exist in 2017, the other 20 odd in 2018, 2019, and then 30, 40 plus in the last 3 years? How do we think about those? And so what I'm going to say is I'm going to make a conservative assumption. The size of base and silver prism will be roughly the size of all other parallels combined. So that means that in 2021 or 2020 for Herbert's cards, let's say, the base and silver prism, those two ones will be the size of all 36 other parallels combined for Justin Herbert. And we're going to do the same for Trevor Lawrence and make that assumption. I think that's a pretty conservative assumption there, that just base and silver is worth everything else combined that's a parallel for prism. And so that means if the base and silver total market is worth 8 million, that means all other parallels are worth 8 million, right? Even though, again, you probably think that is a very conservative assumption, and that is the point. So that's 8 million, but we're still not done with prism yet, right? There's also prism inserts. And the reason why prism inserts are important is because they do make a good chunk of value. So again, we're looking at Mahomes. In 2017, his rookie autograph prism cards are worth quite a bit because it's obviously an auto. But there's also some stained glass here at the bottom, just a handful of those. Up here, there's like 45 here. These cards, the autographs and the stained glass, they're worth quite a bit. And so that's why I'm saying that these inserts should be worth roughly 50% or half of the prism and base market. And so that means that the loss will be roughly half of the loss of the prism and base market. So that means it's worth 4 million because the prism and base market loss is worth roughly 8 million, right? And so that means we've now calculated the entire market loss for Ultra Modern QB rookie prism cards. It's $20 million. We know the number for base and silver PSA 10s was 4 based off of the analysis I talked about it earlier. We know that number is fact. That is fact. The assumptions we're making, as I discussed earlier, is 3 million in losses for the other grades, 1 million for raw, so that's 8 total for base and silver PSA 10s, 8 million for all the other parallels in prism, and then 4 million for the inserts, right? That means total market loss for Ultra Modern QB rookie cards from prism is $20 million. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money just for one brand. One of the main brands, the flagship brand, but it's a big number. But what about all the other Panini brands? We just did Prism, right? We need to now calculate all the other brands. Well, the first thing we're going to do is just do a quick comparison. I went with Justin Fields. He's had a big market correction after he has underperformed. So I'm going to look at his RPAs. We're going to look at the biggest brand I can think of, NT RPAs, National Treasures, out of 99. Right at the beginning of the season, September 6th on Golden, his BGS 9 sold for $9,000. Plus, 24 days later, September 30th on Golden, his RPA, numbered to 99, BGS 9, sold for $4,700. So in the span of a little over 3 weeks, his cards basically got cut in half. That's how bad he played. And most recently in December, a raw version of the RPA out of 99 sold for roughly $3,000. So I think based off of this, it's fair to say that his BGS 9 is probably worth around $4,000 maybe. So it's about a $5,000 loss on his BGS 9. And there's cards that are graded higher than BGS 9, and there's cards that are graded below or raw. But I think on average, we can say that the NTRPA for Justin Fields was a $5,000 loss for each and every one of those cards, right? So that's what we're going to go with. And so that's what the basis for making the analysis I'm about to make, right? So there's, again, the $5,000 average loss on Justin Fields' National Treasures RPAs. I'm going to say there's 80 out in the market because there might be 19 that are unopened, right? There's some unopened wax out there. And so that means the market loss from just Justin Fields' NTRPAs is roughly $400,000. Not total loss, total loss. That's a typo, obviously. Let's keep going. Going back to the loss on Silver Prism PSA 10 and Base Prism PSA 10, the market loss was $200,000. So the NTRPA more than doubles that, right? Or sorry, roughly doubles that. It's $400,000 loss versus $200,000 loss. That's a big number, right? And so if we think through all the other things with the analysis I made, that means that the NTRPAs should be roughly equivalent to the entire loss on Prism cards, because for Fields, that more or less holds true. You basically do a 2 to 2.5x on $200,000, and that gets you pretty close to $400,000, right? But that's just one brand. What about all the other cards in NT, such as the autos, there's some patches, logo mins or shields or whatever, and all the other brands? Look at the number of brands that exist under Panini's umbrella. It's like 37 to 40. And so the assumption, the conservative assumption I'm going to make is that these other 35 brands will be roughly as a whole 9 times the size of Prism. Which basically is another way to think about that is that it's assuming that all of the non-Prism brands will be 25% the size of Prism on average. But keep in mind, that includes things like NT, which we just calculated is way higher than that. It's not a quarter the size of Prism. There's Flawless, Contenders, and Contenders Optic, Don Rust Optic, Select, Immaculate, One, all of these big brands. We're going to say that on average, those brands are 1/4 the size of Prism. I think that's a pretty conservative number. Let's keep going. So where does that leave us? That leaves us, remember the total market loss on Prism was 20 million, which, and I said 9x, right? We came up with 9x back here. It's going to be roughly 9x because that estimates it to be roughly 25% the size of Prism on average for all the other brands combined. So that means the total non-Prism market loss is 180 million, which means the total market loss for Ultra Modern QBs in Panini Prism rookie cards is $200 million. I'm just let that sink in there. $200 million is the conservative estimate for Ultra Modern QBs. Loss. $200 million was lost on Ultra Modern QBs in 3 months. But here's the thing, that's a conservative estimate. You know why that's a conservative estimate? In addition to all of the, what I believe are conservative assumptions I made, I didn't even include non-rookie cards. Think of all the Patrick Mahomes stained glass cards or whatever things that exist out there from 2018 onwards. I didn't include any of that. I only looked at rookie cards. And we're at $200 million. That is a huge number for the hobby. And it really makes you think about all the speculation that's going on and how many people got burned and how many people will basically not come back if this was their first or main experience in the hobby. That's unfortunate. It's troublesome. It's worth thinking about whether or not this is good for the hobby, which I would say it's not. And anyways, that's the number I ended up with, $200 million. I would love to hear your comments. Do my assumptions make sense? What are your thoughts on the $200 million number? My initial estimate of 100 million was off by quite a bit, but here we are. So again, would love to hear your comments on the number, on what you think this impact has, or this number has, and the experience that people in the hobby will have after losing this amount of money if they did invest in an Ultra Modern QB. I would love to hear your comments. As we do sometimes on the channel, we talk or we preview the next video. The next video I'm going to do is talking about how lower interest rates won't help sports card prices. I've seen some people talk about how lower interest rates might be the thing on the horizon that helps sports card prices in the future. I'm here to tell you why I don't think that's the case. That'll be for next time. Thank you as always for watching and listening, and I will talk to you soon. Cheers.